I'm lucky enough to live and work near the Solent, one of the biggest sailing areas in the world. A lot of my patients are keen sailors and they want to know if it's safe to go back to sailing after they've had hip surgery. Keep watching and I'll tell you all about it. The feeling of being pulled through the water by the power of wind and sail is amazing. I didn't sail when I was young, but I've been lucky enough to crew on friends' boats over the years. I did the day's skipper course on the Solent a few years ago, and it made me realise how much you need to know to be a safe and competent sailor, particularly when the conditions aren't too good. I'm very much a fair weather sailor, to be honest, not for me beating into heavy winds and swell. Last week I went on a sailing course in Greece with my brother. We sailed around the South Ionian Sea. It's a beautiful place to visit and sail around. I did a flotilla holiday there many years ago when I was a junior doctor, and I've always wanted to return. I've been to Greece loads of times over the years, but always in the summer when it's hot and sunny. At this time of the year though, it's actually quite surprisingly cold, particularly at night. We even had a hailstorm one night. Lying in the cabin trying to stay warm, it made me think about how my patients who sail might deal with the challenges of being at sea. What are the risks to someone who's had a hip replacement? Well, dislocation and fractures around the hip are the things that worry me most. Being offshore with a dislocated hip replacement would be very uncomfortable, especially if you can't be rescued for a few days. Most injuries though are caused by slips, trips and falls, so we'll look at these in more detail. I like to classify things, so let's look at the risks outside the boat and those inside it. A safe sailing trip starts with a detailed plan a few days before you depart. It's not just about the weather, the tides and navigation. You need to think about what might happen if you were to have an injury and how you and your crew would deal with it. You need to have available first aid kits, painkillers and warm clothing. Tell your companions that you've had hip surgery so that they can pass on the information to the rescue services if they're needed. Getting to the boat can be a challenge. Marinas are generally very well kept, particularly in the UK, but look out for lines, cables and hoses that might be lying around on the pontoon. In Greece, most boats are moored stern to, meaning you back into the mooring. This means you have to walk the plank to get on the boat. Poor light and a bit too much ouzo aren't really a good mix in this situation, so be very careful. On the boat, it's easy to slip on wet surfaces or trip over carelessly laid lines in the cockpit. Getting up and down the stairs into the saloon can be quite tricky, particularly when you're underway and things are a bit rough. If you're an experienced sailor, you know these hazards already, but you might not have done it for a while before surgery, so it really pays to be extra vigilant until you get your sea legs again. If you're racing, then this of course makes things much more challenging because you're dealing with a high workload, often in challenging conditions. I've had quite a few patients over the years who do inshore and offshore racing, and most of them haven't had any problems at all. What about dinghy sailing? Well, I've certainly had quite a few patients over the years who've gone back to it after surgery, but they were all very seasoned sailors. Getting into and out of a dinghy is quite hard work at the best of times, and don't even mention capsizing. So when's the best time to go back to sailing after your hip surgery? For most people, my advice is to leave it for 6 months or until you're fully rehabilitated and not thinking about your hip anymore. If you'd like to know more about going back to sailing after surgery, then please get in touch. The contact details are below in the description. I hope you found this helpful and interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.